I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. You know, we have a really sweet topic and some also hard-headed topics.
Sweet and hard-headed. You love it, you know. We must be talking about trees, right? And all
exactly.
the about trees. Yeah. No. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you all with us today. Yeah, we got some really cool topics, I think, today. We're going to give you a wrap-up of the 2023 Kentucky Maple Day. Our very own Brianna Fortunato has put together a nice video we'll see here in a little bit. We also have Nicole Blancy from West Kentucky. She's a 4-H camp director out there, and they've been playing with maple syrup. So we'll hear from Nicole after the video, but we're looking forward to learning more about kind of how things are going out there in Western Kentucky from a maple syrup perspective. And we also have DJ McNeil back for another bird segment, and this one gets to your hard-headed, Renee. We're talking about woodpeckers, right? Everybody likes woodpeckers, right? So we're going to learn some more about that. We always appreciate having DJ on. He's got a lot of great content and good information, but thank y'all for being with us. If you have any questions, you want to interact with us, you can use the chat function and we'll get with you there. And if you're on YouTube, thanks for being with us there as well.
Definitely. So let's go ahead and get rolling then. So let's roll that footage.
Well, all right. I'm gonna give a little kind of intro to the day before we get to our footage. But let me go ahead and share just a couple of little slides with you all real quick.
All right.
The first one I want to kind of share with you here is, well, this is the welcome slide, but we did wrap up just the other day. Kentucky Maple Day happened the first Saturday in February, and it's been annually done on that day. And, you know, there's been talk about maybe shifting it and others. And I think the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association is looking at maybe shifting that day going forward. However, it's already happened, and this is a wrap up from that. So during Kentucky Maple Day, producers from all across Kentucky, and there's little dots showing you who all participated this past year. We had 19 producers, and including a few county extension offices and the 4-H camp out in West Kentucky, who we'll hear from here shortly, who had participated in Kentucky Maple Day. And what that is basically people open up their farms and their operations to visitors, and not only visitors, to customers as well. And we had really good turnout this year. Weather always helps. And so we're going to see some footage from this most recent Maple Day that we had, and then we'll hear from Nicole. But I wanted to just give you a few little stats before we jumped into that, so you kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. So again, here in Kentucky, we have a number of maple syrup producers spread out all across Kentucky, and they range from very small operations that maybe just produce enough sap or syrup for the table at their own family, or give it away to neighbors, to some that are really doing it at a very large scale commercial basis. So we run the entire gamut here in Kentucky, and that's exciting and fun. And one thing I've really learned working with a lot of these producers is that there's so many different approaches to doing this, right? And so many different ways. So you'll see a variety of different approaches to maple syrup production. But in the end, it's really all pretty simple, right? We're taking sap from those maple trees, and then we're concentrating it down until we're left with a wonderful, tasty product. So I'll give you a couple of stats about this past year. So this year we had a lot of visitors. So of these 19 folks, we did a survey of them and asked them to let us know how many people have been showing up at their Maple Day over the last few years. And you're seeing the results of that survey. And as you can see, we had nearly 2,000 folks visit those farms and extension offices on February 3rd, the 2023 Kentucky Maple Day. So that was a great turnout. So people were really pleased with that. And I tell you, you'll see some of those folks out there, but the producers really appreciate everybody's interest and excitement in that maple syrup. So if you all had a chance to get out and see some of these producers, great. I hope you had a wonderful experience. I know they had a good experience. And if you missed it, be on the lookout next year, and we will let you know when it's coming. The 2024 Kentucky Maple Day. So you don't want to miss that. It's one of really your rare opportunities to get maple syrup here in Kentucky. All right, so how many customers did they have? And they did pretty good on customers, maybe not quite as many in 22. We had a couple of weekends in 22 because of weather, so that kind of extended it out. So people were able to had a little more time to get out, and that helped. But we still had quite a few people that actually purchased maple syrup across Kentucky. So thought that was kind of cool that we had a good turnout, and people were pleased with it. So let me show you a little footage that that was compiled by a couple of our good friends over in UK Ag Communications, Dave Stallion and Steve Patton, along with our own very own Brianna Fortunato, put together this video that you're going to see and highlighting 2023 Kentucky Maple Day. So I'll go ahead and share that now.
We've been here 8 years. We've got a total of 219 acres. Right now we've got 219 taps out at this time. That's probably 185 or 86 trees. I started out with buckets on trees, and the first year, about 7 years ago, we thought, let's try to make some maple syrup. So we tapped 8 or 9 trees down in front of the house.
We started because we went to the extension office in Butler County for a woodlands training course, and they talked about what to do with your woods besides cut them down. And one of the things they said was make maple syrup, and that was around 2010. We just did a few trees the first year, and the second year we got up to about a dozen trees, and then my husband said, let's get an evaporator. And that's when we did all of this with all of these lines.
I have 4.5 acres total, 3 of it's wooded, and I've got 350 taps and 120 trees. Most of my trees are 50 years old. They're over 20-inch diameter. They'll take 3 taps. I started out with 2 taps, turkey fryer and a roasting pan, and being a food manufacturer in a commercial kitchen on my little property, that is something, if you'd have told me 15 years ago, I'd have told you to find a doctor because you need help.
Right here where our house and everything is, we own about 3 acres. We grow the red raspberries and I grow the tame blackberries. And I was looking to get into something else, you know, when all this is out of season and everything. I was at a guy's house one day, he had a pan out there, steam coming up, and I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm making maple syrup. I said, you can't make maple syrup in Kentucky? He said, you just watch me. Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting and something that is here. It's in the trees, you know. Like, people have the misconception of maple syrup coming from the northeast, especially Canada. You know, I thought, well, heck, why can't we make it in Kentucky? There's no sugar maples here on our property. No red, no silver, no sugar. So what I do, the people that have them, the sugar maple trees, I give them a bottle of syrup for letting me go on their property and get the tree sap. The window of opportunity in this area typically is the 1st of January to the end of February. Sometimes you can go to the first week of March. I just watch the buds on the sugar maple trees. When the buds start to swell, that's when I quit. Last year I was somewhere around 1,200 gallons of sap. This year I'm a little ahead of that. You know, if the weather cooperates and the averages all work out and everything.
I got black maple tapped, red maple, and sugar maple. And I think the first year we got 1.5 quarts of syrup maybe and had it in the fridge. We loved it. We are not getting the amount of sap this year that I did last year, and it's due to the weather. Probably about 600 gallons of sap so far.
Where we live, this size operation is about right for the weather. It took us 65 gallons of sap, 65 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup, and we made about 25 gallons of sap. So close to 2,000 gallons of sap.
I do have, like I say, I do haul in sap from my leased properties. That's how I'm able to make 400 gallons a year. I started out with a 10 by 12 building and just had a homemade evaporator pan. It was a flat pan divided with 4 dividers, I would trickle sap in with that 65-gallon head tank, and you had to regulate it by hand. I didn't have a float, and as it cooked down, I could draw it off, and I bottled it in one of them 100-cup coffee pots. That was where I began.
It is a family affair. My daughter that's been zipping around here, she was 13, 14 years old when we started doing this, and now she's a married mother. And she came back to help us today to make sure that we could see all of our visitors. I don't know, maybe there's a historical portion to it also, but it's turned out to be a fun thing to do. And this year, all the trees that were on the buckets and the bags, my grandkids did. You meet a lot of people, and I would say that's half of the fun, is things like this where people come out to your farm, because people come out all the time and just stop by and they say, well, can we see your maple syrup stuff? Sure. It's a good activity for something that not everybody's doing. I do enjoy going out to Ag Day and teaching out there and telling the kids how to do it and showing people you can do this on your own.
I'm a wildlife biologist by trade. I'm retired and started doing this strictly as a hobby. And a lot of what I've learned, I've had to research myself and find out. There's not a lot of people in this part of the world that have made maple syrup. It's a lot of trial and error.
It's just such a unique thing. People will taste the l'orange or the vinaigrette, and those are my creations. It's just been wonderful. It's fun, filled with opportunities. I've met so many people just over the last 4 years. I've probably talked face to face with a couple of million people. I feel like they get something out of it. They get introduced to maple being more than for pancake syrup.
We had a really successful Maple Day. It was our 4th year to do it, and I believe our count yesterday were 36 visitors, and that's pretty good. We had a few regulars, neighbors stop by. Anytime I'm boiling and they see steam coming out of the shed, folks stop by and check it out, you know. People are getting used to seeing us doing it here.
This year, we've had probably 30 groups of people come through today, which has been a nice group, a nice day.
We had over 300 people. People showed up. I didn't even know they'd ever heard of me. And even last year, we had somebody from Cadiz that drove out to South Down Farm in eastern Kentucky. They spent the night, saw their operation Saturday morning last year, and then drove out here and spent the afternoon looking at our operation.
The first year, didn't know what to expect, how many people would show up. The first year I had approximately 65 people. I sell out. I sell everything that I make. One year I did make maple candy, sold all that. One year last year I made maple cream. I love that, but anyway, I sold out. And I'm just glad that the Forestry Department does this, because it highlights Kentucky and the maple syrup industry. And I'm glad they do that. I hope they continue doing it. It helps me out a lot.
Wow. Great job, Brianna. Love the video. A big thanks to all of our producers. They were out there and opened up their properties for folks to come out and allow us to video that. Also, big thanks to our friends over in AgCom for doing the footage. A really, really interesting segment. So, you know, some of the things, you know, I hope you took away from that is that it's a lot of fun, right? It's also a lot of work, so don't kid yourself on that. It takes a lot to concentrate that sap down to get syrup. That's one reason it costs so much, is because there's so much time invested in that. But it's largely an organic product. And as you heard from our producers across the state, uh, we cannot meet the demand. It is such a premium niche product here in Kentucky, and there's opportunity for more people to get engaged and involved with it for sure. So if you're interested in that, we'll encourage you to check us out. We have the Kentucky Maple Syrup Project, and we work closely with the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association to try to support and produce or help our producers here in Kentucky when it comes to maple syrup production. So really cool. We do have a guest that we want to pull on, Nicole Blancy. Nicole, if you can turn on your camera. Nicole is the West Kentucky 4-H Camp Director. I'm out there in Dawson Springs. Nicole, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to hear.
Yeah, glad to hear you. We are having a little bit of trouble with your audio, but hopefully that'll kind of clear up with us. But Nicole, you all been playing with this a little bit. We saw you on the video. I mean, could you just tell us a little bit about what you all are doing with maple syrup out there at the 4-H camp in West Kentucky?
Yeah, so I moved here from Northern Michigan in the winter of 2018 and 19. And when I was hiking through the woods, I saw a maple tree and ants were crawling up the bark. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try this here. And so I just chapped 4 trees that first year and made a little pint of syrup. And we've been working on growing our production ever since. This was the very first year that we participated in the Maple Day, and we had an absolute blast. We had 18 participants from 9 different counties,
Wow.
which was a really incredible showing considering that we only advertised it on our social media and county extension offices know about it. Visitors range all ages. We had some really little guys there, and then we had older folks who were interested in dabbling with maple syrup in their retirement. So it was a really, really wonderful day.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've kind of learned a lot as you progressed, talking to producers, and there's such a diversity of approaches to how maple syrup is produced, as we saw in the video, right? And there's even more than that, ones I've seen. So, it is a little bit of a learning curve to kind of get into it, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And that was really what we wanted to highlight for our portion of Kentucky Maple Day. We are not large producers. We ended our season with only 20 trees tapped, and we made about 3 gallons of syrup total, which we'll probably end up selling out of next year. Considering we sold all of our syrup we made last year at this event. But we really wanted to highlight the educational components of tapping maple trees and the history behind it. So we invited folks in, we served a pancake breakfast, and they had an opportunity to explore different educational stations around our dining hall, where they got to learn about opposite and alternate branching. They got to take a look at equipment that has been used throughout the years. So from the birch bark containers that Native Americans would hold maple sugar in to, now we store in glass or plastic. So tools through time. And so for the day, we really wanted to do the hands-on. Every group that came through got to tap a maple tree with us. And then we took them down to our evaporation station, which is really just an outdoor grill that we put flat pans on. So it's very rudimentary, but we wanted to encourage people to try it in their own backyard.
Well, that's a great point. It's one of those things that you can work with one tree, or thousands of trees. It's very scalable in that regard. And, I really appreciate the educational component, certainly extension and education like go hand in hand. But we have folks, we have like Lacey Kessel up in Boone County, an ag agent up there. And then we have Shad Baker down in Letcher County. They also had operations at their places and they did some similar stuff. So, Nicole, thank you. I know you've also been involved in our the youth project. We've been trying to develop some youth curriculum to try to help the youngins understand about maple syrup production as well. So big thanks to you for working on that. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that, because I know it's kind of a 4-H typey thing.
It is. Yeah, I've had a very small role in that, but I want to encourage you all, if you have young kids at home and you're interested in learning more about maple trees, getting your kids involved is a great way to start out too. And
Yeah,
there's some really awesome 4-H materials out there.
yes, thank you, thank you. And we certainly appreciate all you're doing, Nicole, to help spread the word about maple syrup here in the state, but also helping our youth out there in Western Kentucky as well. So you do important work. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you very much. Take care. All right, folks. So we've got to hear from Nicole, and that was nice. Really appreciate her coming on and telling a little bit about their operation. I encourage you all next year, if you get a chance, to get out, enjoy it. It's a great opportunity to get the family out. And as we heard from the Hitchells there, and we also heard from I think Bizzle Bluff. This is an opportunity to do some agritourism, some stuff on the farm at a period of time when there's not a lot else going on. So we really think long term this has some potential for folks in Kentucky if they're interested. There is some weather concerns, right? And it may not always be a great season, so that's part of it. It kind of goes hand in hand with farming. But we do think there is some opportunity for you. So again, thank you all so much for being with us on that segment there. Now we're going to switch gears and we're going to be looking at woodpeckers. We've got a video from Dr. DJ McNeil, and DJ is our one of our wildlife professors here in the Department of Forestry, and he put together this nice video for us, and I'm going to share it now.
Okay, folks, DJ McNeil here again with another Bird of the Month. I'm very excited to share with you all some life history and identification tips for Kentucky's exciting woodpeckers. These are birds in the family Pickidae. We have a few different species in Kentucky. I'll teach us how to identify those birds visually and tell the sexes apart. Most of Kentucky's woodpeckers can be discerned visually quite easily. As well as talk about the importance of woodpeckers in not only maintaining their own community and ensuring that we have these very interesting birds in the landscape, but also facilitating habitat for other species of birds and even some mammals. So let's get right into it. So what even is a woodpecker? Well, woodpeckers, we're all probably relatively familiar with them. We've probably all seen a woodpecker once or twice, maybe not known what kind of woodpecker it is, but probably seen these birds. And there are a few different characteristics that are distinctive for woodpeckers. Easily the thing that makes woodpeckers famous is their foraging behavior, for pecking on wood. So here we'll talk about these birds. This is a adult male pileated woodpecker and two fledgling pileated woodpeckers, which actually in this case are also a couple of young males. So dad and his two teenage boys, and these birds are foraging on the trunk of a tree. And you can see from the image that there's bark removed from that tree that's sloughed off from those birds pecking at an angle to chip away chunks of bark and even some of the inner tissue of the tree to reveal insects that are hiding beneath the bark. So that's generally what woodpeckers are feeding on are insects beneath bark in trees. And they'll eat things like nuts and seeds as well to a certain extent, but they spend a lot of their time looking for insects and feeding on insects. So you can see here they're clinging to the side of the tree, and that is accompanied by a variety of adaptations that we're going to talk about shortly. But it's important to notice how these birds are holding onto the side of that tree. You can see with the feet and the tail, and we'll talk about that. Another thing that makes woodpeckers very famous is their drumming behaviors. And I wish I could play you the sounds. Maybe at some point we'll become technologically advanced to the point that we can do that. But you'll often hear woodpeckers, they'll do a rapid trill like drum, such as you can see in this image here with this downy woodpecker drumming on the side of this branch. And this is a very rapid series of drumming. And the purpose of this, unlike single pecks or more targeted pecking on a tree, drumming, this rapid trill of drums, is intended to define a territory, essentially. So in the case of this downy woodpecker, he's drumming against that branch, making an echoing trill. And his purpose of doing that is saying, hey, other woodpeckers, stay out. This is my area. Now, maybe if you're a lady woodpecker, this sound gets you pretty excited. This is a good way to attract a mate or maintain a pair bond. And if you're a male, you're threatened by hearing this. Now, as for those adaptations I mentioned, woodpeckers have all kinds of adaptations for clinging to trees, but two of the most important are their feet and their tail. So here on the left, we have a woodpecker's foot. And one thing you'll notice about it is it's what we call a zygodactyl toe arrangement. Now, that's some jargony bird speak, but what it means essentially, in the case of the woodpecker, is that instead of having 3 toes in the front and 1 in the back, which is the standard toe arrangement for most birds, think of like a chicken or even waterfowl, things like that. They have 3 toes in front and 1 in back. Woodpeckers actually have 2 toes in the front, 2 in the back. That helps to support the bird when it's clinging to a vertical surface for a long period of time. The other adaptation is their tail. So their tail, as you can see on the right here for this pileated woodpecker female, it acts almost like an additional leg. So they basically prop their body up by using their tail, which has these stiff but also somewhat flexible tail feathers that they use. They shove those tail feathers against the tree, and it helps the bird to kind of balance and kind of rock back so it doesn't have to put as much effort into holding onto the tree using its legs. And beyond the adaptations for clinging to the tree itself, woodpeckers have a variety of adaptations to the skull that help them to forage and drum on a tree. For one, this purple sort of wire-looking thing, almost looks like a vein or something in this figure, is the woodpecker's tongue. It anchors at the base of the bill, wraps all the way around the back of the skull, up through the mandible and out through the tip where the tongue is expected to be. But the reason why it's like that is because what the woodpecker can do with this really long tongue that wraps all the way around is they can retract it really far back into their mouth, so it's in their mouth when they want it to be, but they can also shoot it way outside their mouth, up to the length of the bill, and the tip of the tongue, and you don't see it well in this image, but is barbed and very sticky, so they can shoot that tongue down into insect cavities in the tree and pull out grubs and beetles and things like that from the tree. The other thing, and this figure doesn't show it well, but I can describe it, I think, in a way that's helpful, is they have a large quantity of spongy tissue, bone tissue between their eye and their nostril, essentially, that kind of like nose area on the woodpecker. And what that spongy tissue essentially does is it keeps the bird from developing a concussion when it's drumming against trees all day. So clearly all kinds of really cool adaptations to foraging on tree bark. Importantly, woodpeckers are also what we call primary cavity nesters. So on the left here we have, it's funny, this picture is a mother pileated woodpecker and their 2 daughters. And we'll learn how you can sex these birds even when they're quite young here in a few slides. But this mother and her 2 young, you can see that they're poking their head out of a cavity. So that tree cavity was constructed by a woodpecker, by that woodpecker. So they're what we call a primary cavity nester. They create the cavities themselves. And that's really important because you have species like the Carolina chickadee shown on the right there, or that may be a black-capped chickadee. Regardless, you have chickadees and nuthatches and bluebirds and all kinds of other birds that use cavities to nest, but they don't create the cavities. Chickadee does not create a nest cavity. So it's what we call a secondary cavity nester, and they rely on birds like woodpeckers to make the cavities for them. So let's dive into a few of Kentucky's woodpeckers. Easily the most abundant, and certainly in urban places, is the downy woodpecker. It's a very small woodpecker, not much bigger than a robin, if bigger at all. Very small little bird. Of course, you'll notice all woodpeckers have this tail that's allows them to prop from the side of the tree, and they've got that zygodactyl toe arrangement. You also notice most of the woodpeckers are black and white and have a dash of red somewhere on them, generally. So the downy woodpecker has these sort of black and white patterning to the face. The male has a little white spot at the very back of the head, and the wings are black and white, basically black with little white spots. And you can see on both of these birds, there's kind of a white streak that kind of goes down the middle of the back. The other thing that's very helpful with the downy woodpecker is notice the bill is quite small, a stubby little bill, and that'll become helpful when we compare to the next bird. And that's the hairy woodpecker. So the hairy woodpecker is a very large woodpecker. Well, not very large. We'll say medium-sized woodpecker, but compared to the downy, it's quite large, up to twice the size of the downy, give or take. The color scheme is largely the same, basically a black and white sort of striped head. The male has a little spot of red there on the left, but notice the proportion of the bill. The bill is much larger on the hairy woodpecker. I've heard some say the downy woodpecker's bill is about a third of the length of the head, whereas the hairy woodpecker's bill is about the length of the head. Next, we have the red-bellied woodpecker. Now, this one's quite confusing. There is a red-headed woodpecker that we're not going to actually cover today because it's fairly uncommon. The red-bellied woodpecker has a red, sort of a mohawk, if you will, or maybe just a strip of red that goes through the nape, over the crown, into the base of the bill on the case of the male there on the left. And you can sort of see on some birds, like this male on the left, there's a little hint of red on the belly, but not a lot. It's a very confusing name. Still, with that in mind, it's very distinctive sort of color palette. It's got this red kind of stripe that goes from the nape to the forehead. It's got kind of this buffy color to the face, and the back is these banded black and white barred bird. Very distinctive. The difference between the male and the female here is, as with the downy woodpecker, less red on the female. Downy woodpecker and hairy, of course, have no red on the female. In the case of the red belly, she has a little bit of red, but it doesn't go quite as far forward. You can see her forehead and the base of her bill are basically just kind of gray or buff. Next, we have the northern flicker. So the northern flicker, this is a very bizarre woodpecker. And it's bizarre because it's one of the only woodpeckers in North America that spends a lot of time on the ground. And all woodpeckers will spend some time on the ground occasionally, but these birds love hanging out on the ground, feeding on insects and essentially flicking their tongues down into an ant nest and pulling those worker ants out of there to feed on them. So a number of things make the flicker distinctive. So both the male and the female in this case have red on the nape, so the female is shown on the right. The male has a mustache, this black mustache, and the female does not, so relatively easy to sex them. It's unique in that it's got a lot of brown to the back. Other woodpeckers are mostly kind of a black and white palette. The flicker has got this kind of salmony colored face, this gray nape, and this brown back, very distinctive. Similar barring pattern that we saw on the red-bellied woodpecker, and distinctive on the breast and other parts are spots, perfect little polka dots, and a black mark on the breast. Next, the yellow-bellied sapsucker. So this is an interesting bird. They're named, as you can see, the bird on the left, which is a male, has a yellow belly. Some females do as well, but it's important to note that the yellow belly isn't very pronounced, and some birds largely lack the yellow belly. Still, it's a very distinctively patterned bird. We've got black and white markings on the face, a lot like the downy and hairy woodpecker. But notice this. So both sexes have red on the forecrown, and the male has a red throat and the female a white throat. So those are pretty distinctive. Perhaps the most diagnostic field mark for the yellow-bellied sapsucker, gives it away every time, is that big white patch on the shoulder. Very distinctive. Even the most drab, young female yellow-bellied sapsucker will have that white shoulder mark. Very interesting bird. It gets the name because it drills these sort of horizontal lines of little circles. You can sort of see them there in the picture with the female. And the tree will leak sap out of those holes, and the sapsucker will feed on that to a certain extent, but more importantly, they'll feed on insects that get trapped in that sap. Very cool bird. And I believe the last one I've got on our list here is the pileated woodpecker. Some people will pronounce it pileated. I've always pronounced it pileated. Very cool bird. It's our largest woodpecker in North America. It's about the size of a crow. You see these birds and you don't forget it. They're just enormous. I've got the male shown on the left. So we've got sort of black and white sort of striping across the face, but it's the only woodpecker in Kentucky that has a sort of three-dimensional pronounced crest like that. So it's your classic Woody the Woodpecker bird here. So you notice that we've got one white stripe that goes sort of from the auricular, kind of behind the ear, down the neck, and up under the wing. Very distinctive. The male has a red mustache and the female has a black mustache, or it kind of just looks like a continuation of one of the neck stripes in the case of the female. Very distinctive bird. We've got white markings on the wings that when it flies are very pronounced. You see little flashes of white when that bird flies. So those are Kentucky's woodpeckers, important ecosystem engineers that create cavities for other birds, and important members of our healthy forest. Looking forward to next month's Bird of the Month. This is DJ McNeil signing off.
Well, that was very interesting. You know, when he was talking about them not getting a concussion, that's something I've always wondered. I'm like, they have got to be the hardest headed birds in the world, you know?
Yes, yes. And you know, the little sapsucker damage that people, we get so many calls and stuff on that. It's really interesting that that's actually a woodpecker that's causing that. So pretty
Right. Yeah.
cool.
You just never know. I mean, you
No.
think it's a bug and it ends up being a bird.
Oh man, yeah, I really appreciate DJ putting that together. Those are always a lot of fun. You know, it was interesting that there's not that many different woodpeckers. You know, I was thinking there might have been more, but yeah, very
Well, I
cool
was talking to him and he did say there were more, but not native to Kentucky.
around here. Yeah,
Around here. So he was, you know, just basically, you know, doing ones that were native to Kentucky. But, you know, some of them were so small and I thought that they would be a lot bigger than what they were. So it's really interesting to find out all of this different kind of information on the different birds out there.
it is very cool. Very cool. Well, folks, it was a great episode again. I really enjoyed today. You know, the Maple Day review is really cool. Big thanks for Nicole for joining us, and again, our friends at AgCom for all their work putting that together. And then learning about woodpeckers, that's always a lot of fun as well. So, yeah, good deal.
Yeah, it was a very nice show. So we greatly appreciate you joining us. And, you know, if you have any questions whatsoever, you can go to fromthewoodstoday.com and you can see any show that we've ever done for the last, however many episodes we've had. But the
There's
last
quite a few on there. Yeah.
you could binge watch us. We say that several times.
Yes.
But you know, there's a multitude of ideas and topics on there that you could find if you just need to do some research or just, you know, want to watch something and just see, I want to learn more about that tree or that bird. We've got it on.
There's a lot there for sure. And we really appreciate all of our team that puts in so much effort to try to make this show good. So thanks to all of them for helping get us good content out there.
Definitely. So, you know, next week we will be on again at 11 o'clock and we hope to see you there and take care and see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
From the woods today.